So Nate, you're shortly off to the UK to look at the election landscape. Yeah. There's an election looming in May. What are the big differences in trying to forecast in the UK versus the US?
So the UK is a lot more challenging for several reasons. One is that we don't have the level of detail in the constituencies that we have like for states in the United States. In 2012, one reason why we could be so accurate is we could see dozens of polls from every state. There you're looking, you have lots of national polls, you have some regional polls, but you're mostly making inferences about how the vote will translate into seats. Right. The other thing is whenever you have more than two viable parties, there's just a lot more vectors along which the vote can move. It's much more complex. And in the UK you have, 4 parties that are a factor in this election nationally.
Which wasn't the case 4 years ago, right? I mean,
well, you had Lib Dems, and that made it tough 4 years ago even.
But the rise of UKIP as a
UKIP, but also the regional parties. I think people are missing the importance of SNP in Scotland, at least the American press covering this election. They're liable to win the majority of seats, perhaps the overwhelming majority in Scotland, and that's going to make it hard probably for any party to achieve a majority. Right.
So in the US, in 2012, you famously predicted the result of every state. I think the first time anyone had ever done that. Isn't that right?
But one thing about the US too is that it's so polarized and partisan that 44 of those states you could predict now for 2016, maybe not 44, but a high number, because some states are so Republican or so Democratic that no matter who the candidate is, they're going to vote that way.
Right. And there's the same phenomenon in the UK, in that there will be swing seats, but looking at the polling currently, it seems to be very much in flux and very unlikely that one party will win an outright majority.
Yeah, you'll probably need some type of coalition. I mean, as we're talking now, Conservatives have ticked up maybe an inch in the polls. They look more likely if anyone wins a majority, but we're partnering with some academics in the UK, and their forecast says there's about a 90% chance that you'll have a plurality winner on May 7, meaning you'll have to have a coalition or even a new election, possibly. Right.
Now, you're not in the business of forecasting who the parties are going to partner with.
But not really. We're looking at what happens on May 7th. Right. I mean, the guys we work with who are all UK-based, they make some assumptions, I think, that you wouldn't have UKIP in a coalition with Labour, for example.
But what are the challenges then facing the opposition parties, like the Labour Party and its leader, Ed Miliband, for example? What are the big challenges?
I know the kind of literature in the US, the political science and the history says that people are mostly voting for the parties and not the candidates as much. They're looking at economic conditions, direction of the country, instead of being worried about personality, I suppose. But I suppose it's sort of appropriate that no party might win a majority because there's no one party in the UK, sort of like in the US, where all its ducks are in a row.
So that the personality factor is the same in the UK versus the US, in that
I don't know.
Outside factors.
This is maybe where either I'm naive as an outsider or it's helpful, or maybe some of both, right? But I know that in the US, the media tends to care much more about the personality-based factors than than voters actually do, where you can model the vote reasonably well on the basis of the economy and partisanship and incumbency and factors like that.
Okay, so let's switch back to the US with Hillary Clinton getting pretty beaten up in the press about her personal email account and the deletion of thousands of emails. Has she been damaged at all? And when you look at the polling data, has her experience with the email deletion, has that damaged her standing with voters?
It doesn't seem like very much, really. We've not really seen, there have not been that many polls, and sometimes these things take a while to show up in the data. Right. But so far it seems like something that the media cares about far more than the public does.
Right, which is often the case.
It's often the case, and some people kind of say, even explicitly, like, well, she might not get a competitive Democratic primary, so it's our job to to vet her and to challenge her. But you know, the Clintons have a weird relationship with the media that you usually have between Republicans and the media, I think, where there's kind of mutual disdain. But you know, that goes back a long way. And so, you know, if you're covering the Clinton campaign, you have to cover the media coverage of her, I think. Yeah.
So let's take a step back. A year ago, you're celebrating the 1-year anniversary of 538. Prior to that, you were at the New York Times when you famously predicted every state in 2012. This very much seems to be the moment for data journalism. I mean, you were the big pioneer of it, but why is it now at the fore, do you think?
I mean, you know, the way I see it is that right now there's a shortage overall in the journalism space of people with STEM backgrounds, so kind of science, math, engineering. You know, in part because
they're all frustrated poets, right? I mean, it's
sort of. Look, there are a lot of really great journalists, right? But you know, you can look and see. You can actually go to the data and kind of look and see what's the average, you know, math SAT or GRE score among journalists versus verbal score, and the verbal's very high. The math is fine, but you know, but there's a lot more competition from other fields. So you know, so in some ways, I think in a perfect world that data journalism will be a redundant term because all journalism ought to be data literate and evidence driven, in my view, and you know, to use programming and coding and statistics and those tools along with other types of reporting. But right now, we think there's a shortage of that talent and a shortage of media outlets who are doing enough of it. But we think there's also room for lots of different people.